Hi, in this lecture you will learn how to create and use the local subprograms. As you know, we create procedures and functions to reduce the code crowd when we do the same things over and over again. We create functions or procedures based on our job needs and use them whenever and wherever we need. But notice that we create these functions and procedures in the schema level, means it is stored in the database. Because of that, we call them as stored procedures or stored functions. Even if it seems really useful, sometimes it is unnecessary to keep these subprograms in the database. Let me explain that. Assume that we create a program that does a specific job, for example, a salary calculation. And in this program or code, we use the same code again and again. What do we do for that normally? We create a function or a procedure not to write the same code again and again. But the problem starts here. We create these in the database. Once we finish our job, we may not need these subprograms anymore, because sometimes these functions are specific for only our job. I will not use these subprograms in another time after that. If we create these subprograms in the database schema, it will not be useful after that. If we create all the subprograms in the database level, this time there will be a subprogram crowd under our schema. There will be too many functions, for example, so it will be hard to find a specific function in the functions list. Without further ado, I need to say that we don't need to create our subprograms in the database level all the times. We can create our subprograms inside of another subprogram or even inside of an anonymous block. These kind of subprograms are called as local subprograms. With creating local subprograms, we avoid the subprogram crowd. We create our subprograms locally, we use it in the surrounding subprogram or anonymous block, then it will be automatically deleted when our anonymous block or surrounding subprogram finishes. Alright, to sum up, the benefits of our local subprograms are: reduce code repetition because you type for one and use them anywhere in the surrounding blocks. Improve code readability because they reduce your code crowd. Need no more privilege. You know that to run any function or procedure, you need to have a privilege if it is not in your schema. But local subprograms does not need an extra privilege. These are the pros of the local variables. Are there any cons for them? Yes. Since they are created in another subprogram or anonymous block, they are accessible only in the blocks that they are defined. That means you cannot reach to that subprogram out of its block. We will see that in our examples. Alright, now we know why we use the local subprograms. Now let's see how we use them. The create code is all the same except for the create or replace command. In local subprograms, we don't write create or replace commands. We simply start with function or procedure keywords. The rest is the same. The usage is also the same. The main difference is we define our local subprograms in the declaration area of our anonymous blocks or subprograms. We cannot declare it in the begin end block or in the exception section. Now, let's open up the SQL developer and start creating our first local subprogram. Assume that our manager wanted us to create a table that includes the high-paid employees, so that they can easily report from that table. Let's create our empty table based on the employees table first. Create table emps high paid as select all the columns from employees where 1 is equal to 2. Now let's run it. Great, we have created our table. Now we need to write a plsql code to insert the high paid employees into that table. Of course, this can be done by some easier ways, but to exemplify the local subprograms, we will create a local procedure and a local function inside of our anonymous block. So let's start then. We simply write declare. Now I will use a procedure to insert an employee into our table. Procedure insert high paid emp, and the parameter is emp id employees dot employee id %type and our is keyword. Now, I will use the record type as the variable because it's easier with records. So I write emp employees %row type and our begin keyword. Now I will get the employee from a function. I will create that function after creating the procedure. Now I will simply call it emp is equal to get emp, our function, and emp ID. I got the employee from a function with using the employee ID. Now I will insert the employee record into the table. Insert into emps high paid values emp and our end keyword. Great. Now let's create the function that we used in our procedure. Function get emp, let's say emp num is employees dot employee ID %type and return employees %row type and our is keyword. Now our emp record again, emp employees %row type and our begin keyword and our select into class. Select all the columns into emp from employees where employee ID is equal to emp underscore num. And we need to return that emp variable. Return emp and our end keyword. All right, now we can start typing our logic. Our begin keyword of our anonymous block. Now I will create a for in loop with using the inline select cursor. For r underscore emp in our select statement and our loop keyword and our end loop. Now our if clause, if r underscore emp dot salary is greater than 15,000, then now I will use my procedure to insert that employee. Let me copy the name from here. And r underscore emp dot employee ID. And now our end keyword. Great. Our code is ready now. Now let's check if it works. It did not work. Why? The reason is we typed our function after the procedure, but we used it inside of that procedure. Now here is the thing. Since our code is executed from up to down, our function is not known inside of our procedure because our procedure is typed before our function. If you use a subprogram in somewhere, you need to declare it before using. To make that code run properly, I simply cut the function declaration and paste it before the procedure declaration. Let me do that. Let's indent them a little more. Now let's run it again. We have a typo here. We have forgotten to close our if clause and if. Now let's clear up and run again. As we can see, our block successfully completed. Now let's check if it could make the inserts. Select all the columns from emps high paid. As you can see, it inserted 3 employees who earn more than 15,000. Now, here's the thing. Let's check our code again. We created a function and used it only inside of our procedure. So, can we create our function inside of our procedure? Yes. Let's do it then. I simply cut my function and paste it inside of our procedure declaration area. Let's indent these a little more. Great. Now let's run it again. Now let's check the inserts again. As we can see, it worked. That means we can create a subprogram not only in anonymous blocks, but also in another subprogram. Now, let me show you one more thing. It's about the scope of variables. As you can see, there are two AMP records in our code. One in the procedure and one in the function. But here's the thing. The uppermost AMP record is global for our function because our function is at the same block of that variable. So we can use it inside of our function too. That means we don't need to create another record in our function. So we can delete it. Let's delete it then. Now let's run it. Now let's check the inserts again. As we can see, it worked. We can use a variable that is created at the surrounding block inside of the inner block. Since our function has its block and it is inside of the procedure block, we can use the procedures variables too. Great. Now I will show you one last thing. It is the position of our local subprograms. Now let's try to declare a new variable right after the function declaration. I simply write EID, its number. As we can see, it is underlined with a red color. That means there is an error. Now let's try to run it. As we can see, there is an error. It says encountered the symbol EID when expecting one of the following: begin, function, pragma, or procedure. Here's the problem. After declaring a subprogram, you can write a begin keyword, a new local function, pragma keyword, or a new local procedure. That means you need to write your local subprograms as the last in the declaration area. To see that better, now let's cut our new variable and paste it under the AMP variable. And run it. As we can see, it worked successfully. So our local subprograms should be written as the last in the declaration area. Now, before finishing this lecture, let's try to use our procedure in another anonymous block. I simply write our begin and end keywords and use our procedure. It's enough to write a random employee ID. Let's say 102. Now let's run it. As you can see, it did not work. The error says the identifier insert high paid amp must be declared. It says I don't know it because it is declared in our anonymous block and only known by that block. It is not known by the database at another time that this code is running. But don't mix that up. Even if you call it from another block when it is running, it won't be known by another anonymous block or subprogram anyway. These local subprograms are known only in the surrounding anonymous blocks or surrounding subprograms. The others cannot see or run it. Great. Now we know how to create a local subprogram, where to create it, and how to use it. Besides, we learned the scope of the variables, then we use them with the inner or outer blocks with local subprograms. So this is the end of this lecture. See you in the next one.